Hello everyone and welcome back to Code with Beto. In this lesson, we are going to learn how we can follow a design system to create a beautiful website following best practices with the latest technologies. In previous lessons, we've been talking about design, how we can use Tailwind CSS, CSS modules, animations, and all that, right? But we've been talking very superficially. Now, in this lesson, I want you to follow along with me because this is a really good opportunity to really and truly learn how an application should be built following best practices with TypeScript using Next.js and React as the framework. Okay, so just try to follow along with me. Would highly recommend that you do this by yourself, not just copy paste the code, because this is going to really help you understand a lot of things. We're going to be touching some topics like using context to share state. Also, we're going to be using some external libraries, UI libraries as well. And yeah, so let's get started and actually see the demo of what we're going to be building. And here it is, guys. So one of my friends says White, as you can see here. You can go ahead and follow him. He's a designer, also a front-end developer. And I asked him to create a design for this lesson. So for this lesson, we're going to be creating no more, no less than a to-do application or a task manager application, as you can see here. So let's go ahead and open this. I'm going to hit open in Figma. Of course, you can find this link for the design down here. I would encourage you to explore the design and maybe make some changes if you want to. Change the color, change the size, the border radius, and then follow along with me. It's gonna be very fun. So here we have the cover. It's just this thumbnail. And then on the left, we can check these pages that comes with this design. So I'm going to select the footer. And as you can see, so this is like a thumbnail. And this is for codewithbeto.dev. And then we're gonna be using ShadCN UI. We talked a little bit about ShadCN, and it's a UI library that it's going to allow us to quickly develop beautiful components using React. Then Eco Studios, it's a company that can help you actually to create a website or whatever word you need, design website application. You can contact them, and if you need like a design, Cesar is actually the founder, my friend. So if you need it, just go ahead and go to the website and you can find their contact. Then we also have this React with TypeScript course, which is this course, and also the demo. Now, before I show you the demo, let's go ahead and just select this task manager here. And here we have like the design, right? The pages, how this is going to look. And let me just zoom a little bit here. And of course, the idea is that we create this website as pixel perfect as possible, but of course you are welcome to make some changes if you want. Now let me bring my browser. Okay guys, so this is the demo. Of course, you are going to find this link as well down here. It's porter demo.vercel.app. So I deployed this on Vercel. And yeah, so this is the application that we're going to be doing or building. As you can see, this is a simple to application, but there's some cool things about this. It's very lightweight, as the name says. And of course, we have these shortcuts. So if I want to create a new task, I can, of course, just press this plus on the pending side and cancel. And also the cool thing about this is that I can drag and drop, which is very nice. I can drag and drop inside this list. So for example, if I want to put everything on pending, I can do that. I can select plus to create a new task, close, and I can use shortcuts. So I'm going to press Command K, and right away we have this view and I can start typing. So I'm gonna say test, and then we can select security priority. Of course, this is something that I thought about. You can change this if you want. You can add more properties. And yeah, so let's say hi, for example, and this is a description, and we can press enter or simply press save. So I'm going to press enter, of course, tab and then enter. And here we have it. This is the new task. Of course, You can change the functionality of these guys. So for example, if I press on these three dots, we also have this cool drop down. We can delete, update, and mark as favorites. In this lesson, we're gonna just learn how to delete, but of course, update and add to favorites. It's like ideas for you to improve this, or yeah, so to do something similar. So I'm going to delete this one, and this is how it looks. So the cool thing about this task manager is that you can basically drag and drop, and this is very responsive. You can change this and move it around, and everything is very smooth. Now that we know what we're going to be building, let's actually go ahead and analyze a little bit what technologies we're going to be using. Of course, the most complicated thing that comes to my mind when I saw this for the first time is that we actually need to handle this drag and drop. So for this drag and drop, we're going to be using a library, external library, npm package, developed by Atlassian. So Atlassian is a software company, and this library, it's very famous. As you can see here, it's used by almost 100K developers. And yeah, so it's very nice. You also have these like demos of what you can do with this library. So this is basically what we need, right? That's why we decided to use this library. This is another point to make a pause and really think. When we are trying to create a website or a product, what we really need to care, it's about doing it right and doing it fast. Okay, so using this library, of course, I wouldn't recommend to use any library. I'm using this library because, one of the most famous software companies developed it, and it's maintained by them as well. So we are assured that this is high quality software, and we can use this library in our advantage. Okay, so this is how it looks here. This is the GitHub link. Then we're gonna be using Next.js for the framework. We could use just a better React project, but like I mentioned before, when you're gonna be creating a new React application, I would highly recommend that you use Next.js, because most of the time you're gonna be making some changes. For example, let's say that a lot of people is using this to-do application and we need to scale. They are asking us to save these to-dos or save these tasks into a database, and then basically start scaling the project, right? So we need to add authentication, we need to add a database, handle saving, fetching data, and all that is going to be easier for us if we just use the latest technologies that come with React. Next.js allows us to do that. We already talked a little bit about Next.js and what are the advantages of using Next.js. So we're going to be using it. We're going to learn how to create a new application with Next.js. Then we're going to be using this UI library. Like I mentioned before, we care about developing fast and developing in a good manner, right? Following best practices. That's why I decided to use this component library so that we can actually build quickly without having to deal with, creating my components from scratch. And for styling, we're going to be using Tailwind CSS. So the Chat-CN UI uses Tailwind CSS by default. But yeah, we're going to be using Tailwind CSS as well. All right, for styling and any changes that we want. And yeah, so this is what we're going to be doing. So let's go ahead and start creating this application. And actually, guys, before we go ahead and create the project, what I want to say is that we need to come here and actually check out the design, right? We haven't done that. Of course, you can see here that if I zoom out, we don't have at the moment like a design of how this is going to look for mobile. And sometimes as front-end developers, we're going to be encountering these kind of problems in which we don't have a design for specific states of the application. So I would encourage you to just, ask if you want to the design team or that, how the component or the website would look in some screens, or simply have a common sense, right? So common sense would be like, for example, if we have 3 columns, like you can see here, if we have, a small screen, of course, we can show at least one column, right? So the only thing that I'm thinking of is like presenting everything in one column, and that would solve the issue. Yeah, we're gonna be doing that. Okay, now this is how it looks. Of course, I made some changes on the UI. It's not exactly as this, but of course you can do it if you want. This is how this card works. And of course, the advantage that we have at this point is that because this design is using as well the ShadCN UI library, we can simply use these components and we're going to have the same style without doing anything. Of course, there's something that changed, but yeah, this is basically how it's going to look. Okay, now that we've seen, of course, we also have some variants if we want to, create a sidebar for this, if we want to create this modal to create a new task, or simply integrate it the way I did it in the demo. These are like ideas for you to experiment and do it yourself. All right. Now, keep in mind, guys, that if you don't want to, use the ShadCN UI, you can come here and actually enable developer mode here, and you're going to be able to see all the measurements, and we already saw how to do this on the Figma lesson. So yeah, you can go ahead and check the exact pixel spacing, the layout, padding, margin, and everything, so that your design is pixel perfect at the end of the day. All right, now that we know that, let's close this let's minimize this and let's start a new project. Alrighty, guys, so the first thing that I want to do is actually create a Next.js project. So if we go to the Next.js webpage, we can click on Get Started and Get Installation. We're gonna need Node.js 18 or later. This is very important. So if you don't know your Node version, you can simply run Node -v. So if you see here, I have version 16. And I also have NVM. So NVM is a Node version manager. And if if you want to check it out, you can just search for NVM and install it in your computer. You can see that I have 3 versions of Node. So I want to be using the version 19. So I'm gonna say NVM use 19. And this is very cool because we can switch between versions all the time and we're gonna be good to go. All right, and now if I run Node version, you can see that I have version 19, and actually I can go ahead and create a new Next.js project. Before I do that, I want to move to my desktop and then inside my test folder, and here I'm going to run this command. So npx create next app latest, hit enter, and I need to install this. So I'm gonna say yes. What's your project name? This is going to be Porter Task Manager lesson. Okay, hit enter. Would you like to use TypeScript? Of course. Would you like to use ESLint? ESLint, of course, as well. And we're going to learn more about ESLint in the future, but basically allows us to catch bugs earlier and basically keep the code consistent throughout the code base. Would you like to use Tailwind CSS? Yes. Would you like to use source directory? So source directory, it's a preference for the developer, I would say. So I'm going to say no for now, because this is a very simple application. We're not going to have a lot of pages or a lot of folders at the end of the day. So without the folder, we're going to be good. We want to use the app router, which is like the navigation system that comes with Next.js by default. We want to use it, although we're not going to be using it a lot because we only have one page at the moment. So this is the home screen. And then if we decide to add authentication or something like that, we can do it later. And we can basically, add more pages, and it's going to be easier because we already have this app router, right? Would you like to customize the default import aliases? I'm gonna say no, and then that's all. It's installing, and we just need to wait a little bit. Now, while we wait, remember that we're gonna be using ShadCN UI. So let's go ahead and go to the documentation, and in the installation process, we can select Next.js. So here they're walking us how to create a new application using Next.js. We already have this, so we can skip that one. What we need to do now is actually just run this command to set up the project. So let's copy this command. We're using npm, by the way. Of course, this is ready. So what I want to do before I actually do anything else, I'm going to cd into this Porter Task Manager lesson, and then open this on Visual Studio Code by saying code dot. Already, and here we have the project. This is how the new Next.js app looks like. Because we're using the app router, we have this app folder, which basically contains the home page, the layout page, and the global CSS files, already configured Tailwind CSS, and this five icon of Vercel. Okay, then we also have some SVGs, and basically that's it. Everything else is just configuration. We have the tailwind.config.ts. We can make some configurations here, but I think we're good with what we have at the moment. What I want to do now is open my terminal and then run this command to start setting up the UI library. Okay, so let's hit enter. Let's wait a little bit. So they're going to be asking us some questions as well. Would you like to use TypeScript? Of course, we are using TypeScript already. Which style would you like to use? So ShadCN UI, if I go quickly to their components, you can see that they have New York and default. So New York, it's like smaller and not too much padding. And I like that, so I'm gonna be using New York. And then which color would you like to use as base color? So if we go to Tailwind and simply search for colors, let's see, let me just 1 second. Here we have colors. So we have slate, which is this one. This will be the palette that we would be using if we select slate. We also have gray, zinc, neutral, and stone. So basically zinc, neutral, and stone these are the base colors. I really like slate. I actually use slate for code with Beto. So let's just select slate. You can select whatever you need. Then let's go back. Where's your global CSS? It's inside my app folder, as you can see here. So this looks good to me. I'm going to hit enter. CSS variables for colors. I'm going to say nope. And then where's your Tailwind CSS config? It's in the root folder, so that looks good. Configure the import alias. Let's do that. That basically is going to allow us to don't have to put the entire route every time that we import a component. And then for utilities, we want to do that as well. Are you using server components? In this case, yes, because we're using Next.js, the latest version. And App Router automatically out of the box comes with support for server components. So let's select yes. Right configuration, 2 components, components.json, and that's it. Alrighty. Okay, I think I needed to say yes in the last one. So let's go ahead and do that again quickly. Yes, New York, slate, that's correct. Would you like to use CSS variables? No. Tailwind config, that's correct. All right, yes, and yes. Okay, so we needed to say yes at the end of the day so that everything that we said, the configuration is going to be applied. So once we do that, you can see that we have now this tailwind.config.js, which contains configuration for the components that we're going to be using with this library. Of course, we already had a config file, and this one is just extending that functionality, okay? So what I can do here is, I don't know, maybe just delete the one we had already. So I'm going to move that to the trash and then change this to be .ts, sorry, and we should be good to go. All right, let's hit save. Close this. Now let's try to run this project. So to run an Next.js project, if we come back here, you can see that we can simply say next dev. And a way to actually see how we can do this, we can simply open the package.json. And here you're going to find these scripts. Also keep in mind that we're going to be using npm. The reason I know we're using npm is because we have this package log.json. That means we're using npm. So if I want to run this dev script, which is going to start the dev server, I can simply say npm run dev and hit enter. Okay. Now I'm getting an error here. Okay. Now guys, I'm getting this error because if you remember, we need to have Node version 18. So I'm using here version 16 by default. So I need to do again npm use 19 and node b, and now I can run npm run dev. Okay, we are good now. Now this is running on the localhost 3000. So we can simply click on this and this is going to open on the left side. And this is how it looks, the Next.js project. Of course, this is configuration that comes by default. And the first thing that I want to do is just go ahead and open my app global CSS files. Then we also have the layout. This is like the entry point for the entire website. And this is very cool. We have here like the container, and we have this body that contains the children, and the children, it's at the end of the day, this page which is what we are seeing on screen. So I want to start fresh and I want to delete everything here and just create a simple main tag and hit save. Maybe I can create a h1 that says hello. Okay, and there is. Oops, there is, very small already. Now, before we can actually start developing this application, we need to start making some configurations and really think about how we want this, how we're going to be structuring this application. All right, because this is how it looks at the moment. And we really need to think about the structure of each to-do or each task. And we also need to really think about the structure of the entire layout. Because if I put pending in the middle and then copy this, I'm going to close this window. I set pending in the middle and I open it again, and you can see that the state it's being saved. Even though if I reload, if I move everything and reload, everything is being saved locally. So we need to really think about that. And as a user, I mean, I really like that my layout is staying the way I like it. So the way we can start doing that is actually go ahead and create a new file that is going to contain like the structure of each piece of the state that conform this application. Let's go ahead and create a new folder called types. And inside these types, I'm going to create a new file called types.ts. So this is going to contain my types, and this is really helpful because it's going to give us like we can actually see how these to do or these tasks are going to look, what fields they're going to have, and all that. Okay, so I'm going to start by exporting a new type, and this type is going to be a task, and this task is going to have an ID. The ID is going to be string. It's going to have a tag as well, which is going to be string, and then I can duplicate this. We're going to have as well a tag, a date, and a description. So I'm going to say description, and this is my type. So if you pay attention, this is what we're seeing on this demo, right? So we have a title, which is a task. We have a description, and I can put this description up here. We have a tag that says low, high priority, and then we also have a date. Okay, and then yeah, we can add more things. For example, is completed or something like that. But for now, let's keep it simple for the first version, right? Now, once we have this, what I want to do is create some dummy data maybe to see the structure that we want to achieve of this data, right? So let's go ahead and just create a file here. Maybe we want to delete this later. So I'm going to say dummy data.ts. And inside this dummy data, I want to really think about the structure or my entire, screen. So how can we structure this? Well, another cool thing that I'm thinking is that if I want to add another column, we should be able, right? Without having to change anything on the code. So if we keep these columns as an object that contains keys, and for each key, we have this column, right? So in this case, let's say that we have an object, and I'm going to start by saying, export const initial state. This is going to be my initial state. And this is going to be equal to an object. This is what I'm saying. Now, in this case, we're going to start with 3 columns, but maybe in the future, we want to add a option to create a new column. For example, this column could be containing favorite tasks, right? Or deleted tasks. So because I want to be scaling up and scaling down, maybe we just want one column, we should be able to think about that and we should be able to do that in the future without having to change anything in the code. So what I'm thinking is that maybe we can have by default 3 columns. The first one is going to be pending. So if I say pending, now pending is going to be a column, and it would be nice if this is an array. So I'm going to create an array that contains, at the end of the day, tasks, right? So pending is going to have a list of tasks. Now I need some tasks, so I'm going to just copy paste some tasks that I have here, and this is how it looks, right? So we have this task by default. Of course, we need some dummy data so that we can actually develop this. Now this is pending. I'm going to minimize pending, and then by default we're going to have an ongoing, and then we also have a done, right? You can have more if you want, but for now I want to have this, right? Now I don't have a type for this initial state. It's being inferred by TypeScript, and this looks bad, right? What I want to do now is actually create a type for my initial state. So let's go ahead, go back to the types, and in these types, I'm going to create another type, and I'm going to export it as well. And this export type is going to be task map, because at the end of the day, it's a map. So how the map looks, let's go ahead and put this on the right. A map has a key, so the key is of type string, and that also has an array of tasks, right? So an array of tasks, which is my type here. Perfect. Let's hit save, and let's come back here to the initial state, and I want to say that the initial state is going to be of type, it's going to be of type task map, and hit enter. Nice. So by typing this in this manner, we are able to, the next time that we need to change some things, maybe we can add another field here, and we should be able, right? Now, also we're going to have autocomplete when we're using this task map as well. And yeah, so once we have that, we can actually start thinking on what else we're gonna need for this board, right? Now, another thing, very important thing, because if you pay attention, this is going to allow us to keep track of the columns as well as the items inside these columns, right? So for example, let's say that the user comes and drags this and places this at the first index, we should be able to save this state like that. But what happens if the user comes and drags this to the end, drags this ongoing to the end? We should be able to save that as well. But because we have this data structure for now, it's not possible for us. So we need to create another data structure that is going to keep track of the order of the columns, right? Because we want to have this nice functionality. So let's create another type, and let's try to go one step above. So I'm going to create a type called board, and this board, it's basically what we are seeing here. This board is going to have columns, and a column is going to be of type task map, right? Apart from the columns, we want to save the order of these columns. So I'm going to create another called order, and this is going to be an array of strings, okay? So this basically is an array of keys, which are ongoing, done, and pending. But if I move pending to the bottom, I want to be able to save that state in this order field, so that when I re-render the application, I know the order and I can present it as the user wants it, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. So I think we're good for now. Let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to close my dummy data for now. And alrighty guys, so we have these very important things. We are thinking about the structure of the data, but now let's take a little break and let's go to the layout and actually play around a little bit with the design of this application. So let me open the local host here. I'm going to start by actually deleting this that we are not going to be using, okay? And deleting this class name as well. Now, remember that we are using Tailwind CSS, right? So what I want to do here and what I like to do here is create a border and then say border red 500, hit save. And you can see that we have this border, right? But of course, this border is not like the way I want it. So this layout, it's a perfect place to start defining the boundaries of my UI. So if I say hide screen, I want to have the height of the screen. This is good because I'm taking out the entire space. And then I want to add some padding so that, the content is not very attached to the corners. And then when the content is large, I want to have a padding of 16. And you can play around with these values, of course. And if I hit save, you can see that we have this padding now. Padding 16. Let's say I want a background slate of 50 so that we can give it this feeling. If you want to, maybe do dark mode, you can do so. We also have 950, and you can play around with these colors. But yeah, I'm going to be using background color slate 50. All right, what else? Well, what I want to do now is actually create like another container inside this container that is going to have my my content, right? So this is going to be a div, and inside we can say class name, and I'm going to copy basically this border. I like to do this because I'm able to see what I'm doing, right? So in this case, we're working on this rectangle, and then I want to say that at medium screen, I want to have a max width of screen large, sorry, XL, and margin X auto. So this means that if I keep scaling this is going to stay in the middle. Okay, as you can see there, because I set margin X auto, this is going to be staying in the middle, and the max width is going to be screen XL. Okay, you can play around with these values. And yeah, that's the layout I want. Basically, that's all I needed. Now I can actually delete this by saying Command F and replacing this with nothing. Okay, hit save, and that's it. All right, cool. So that's the layout that we want. Now let's go to the page, which contains actually the content for the home screen, right? So for the page, let's go ahead and start creating some titles maybe. So I'm going to create a div, and inside this div, I'm going to have an H1, and here we can say Porter, which is a lightweight task manager. Hit save. Cool. Now, because we're using, Tailwind CSS, this H1, it's very small. So we need to say class name, text 3XL, and then font bold. Hit save. Cool. That looks better, right? Then I want to create another div here, and inside this div I'm going to say border red. As you know, this is my technique, and inside this div we want to have an icon, and this icon is going to be like the reference to the source code of this rep. So if we go back to the chat UI and go to the components, we need a button at this point. So if we scroll down to button, you can see that the installation is going to be just running this command. So let's copy and let's open the terminal. I'm going to create another terminal here. Let me check the node version. Okay, so I'm using in 16. I'm going to say npm use 19, and then I'm going to install this button, hit enter, and we should be able to see the button inside this components UI. So this worked, right? Let me close this again. Now we have this button that we can use it in our application. So yeah, so this is how it looks. We have some variants, default, destructive, online, and this is basically the component. We don't really need to understand how this works, just that we have some variants. So let's go ahead and actually use this button here. I'm gonna say button. I'm going to import from my UI, and inside this button, I actually want to have this a tag, anchor tag, sorry. Yeah, and of course, I'm not gonna be adding the link here. I'm just gonna say git ref, but I want to have a GitHub logo icon. And these icons are being imported from Radix UI, which comes by default. By default was installed when we installed the Shad UI library. So if I hit save and go back to my local host, you can see that we have this button here. And if I press it, doesn't happen. Nothing happens, right? Cool. So now I want to just delete this and say that this is going to be a flex. Actually, no, we don't need like anything here. I'm going to delete this div as well. What I want to do now is inside this div, I'm going to add a class name. I'm going to say flex. Then I want to have these items to the center and justify between. All right, and this is looking good. Now here I'm gonna say margin bottom 6 because I want some space between this and my dashboard. Yeah, so basically this is like the header, right? So I'm going to minimize this div for now. Then in the demo, I have some text that looks like this. But for now, I'm just going to delete it. We don't need it. After this, we should be able to add the dashboard. And finally, we have this like footer that contains, or it's going to contain these shortcuts. And these shortcuts are being hid on screens that are small than, let me see. Yeah, small than large. Okay, so they are hidden on mobile devices because mobile devices don't have keyboard, right? So they don't need shortcuts. And if I make this bigger, when we hit the large mark, it's going to be flex, which is going to display this. Okay, perfect. Now these shortcuts doesn't work yet. We're just going to leave them there. But yeah, so let's go ahead and actually work on this dashboard. So the dashboard is going to be very interesting. We're going to be using, like I mentioned before, this library. So let's install it. So I'm going to scroll here and hit installation. And the way we install this is by saying npm install react beautiful DnD -save. So let's copy this and let's go ahead and again, I'm going to minimize this and move this to the left. I'm going to say npm use 19. Sorry about these guys because I have a lot of versions here. And then I'm going to install this library. Okay. Now that I'm here, I actually want to go ahead and install some components that we're going to be using from ChatCN. So if I go to components, and of course I'm going to make this bigger, we're going to be using a card as well. So card is going to look like this. Let's go ahead and copy and paste it here. We need card. We also need a drop-down menu. So let's scroll down here. I think I can install this by just saying drop-down menu as well. And then we're also going to need a form, an input, and label. So form is going to be a bit trickier, I think. Nope, I can say form only. Input is going to be just input, I guess, and label. And what else? We're gonna need as well a text area. And I think that's all we need. So if I hit enter, I should be able to see these components be generated for me on the components UI, which is pretty amazing, right? We don't need to create these components and they are going to be styled by default. We also installed the beautiful DnD, drag and drop. And yeah, so we should be able to use these components. All right, so I'm going to close this terminal and close this. If you want to like inspect each card, you are welcome to do it. Each component, sorry. Otherwise, you can also come to the documentation and read a little bit about each component and how the code looks like, how you can use it. But also we're gonna be learning how to use it so you can have a better understanding here. Now, what I want to do is just work on the dashboard. So for the dashboard, we're going to have a component. We really need to think about how we're going to be decoupling this. So let's start with a dashboard. So inside my components, I'm going to create a new file called dashboard.tsx. This is going to be a component. Note that this is outside the UI, right? This UI is just components that we're using from the ChatCN library. And outside we're going to have the dashboard. Now, before I jumped into this, I really want to show you guys how this library works at a high level, right? So let's go back here and let's just see this image because this image basically tells us everything. So what we're seeing here is the API, the structure of this library. We have a drag drop context. We have a droppable, we have a draggable, which makes a lot of sense, right? We need a place to drop items, and we need items to be draggable. And that's basically all we need to understand. So if you pay attention at the API here, we need a drag drop context, which basically it's like a wrapper that knows that inside it's going to have a droppable and a draggable. So if we go quickly to the demo, you can see that this item is going to be a draggable, right? Because I'm dragging it. But these draggables are inside droppables, which means I can drop this draggable here, or I can drop it here, or I can drop it here. But the cool thing about this is that we are going one level deeper, which means that this little thing is also a draggable, but this little thing, it's a draggable and also it's a droppable, because I can drag this one and drop it here, and drag this one and drop it here. But if you pay attention, you know, the title and this button is not a droppable. This title, it's the draggable, right? I mean, the droppable, it's inside this component, if that makes sense, right? So try to keep that in mind. Try to wrap your head up around that. But basically, that's all we need to understand, right? We're going to be showing you how we can use this exactly, right? Now, let's go ahead and go back to this. Let's create the dashboard. The dashboard, it's going to have, like I mentioned before, drag context, right? We need the context. We need the context so that we're able to start dropping some things. So I'm going to say export default function, and I'm going to export my dashboard. And this dashboard is going to be a JSX element. Inside, we're going to return a drag drop. And I'm not seeing this. Let me go to my package, DnD. Okay, we have this DnD. Okay, and the reason for why we're not getting any autocomplete here when I'm trying to import or use this component is because we didn't install the types. So let's go ahead and let's npm use 19 and then npm install, and I'm going to install the types for this library. Okay, so npm install types, hit enter. Now let's see if that solves the issue. Let's go ahead and try to use this drag drop context. Okay, perfect, and we're able. So sorry about that, I forgot to add that library. Okay, so let's close this. And yeah, so let's move on. Now, there's a couple things that we need to understand. Of course, TypeScript is helping me, or in other words, yelling at me, because this needs to have some properties or some events that we need to be handling. And on drag end, it's the only one that is required. But as you may guess, we also have other events, like for example, on before, on drag start, on drag update, and stuff like that. Okay, so we are not going to be using any other event, but it's good to know that you can improve this by accessing other methods. So on drag end, it's just a handler, and we need to write this handler. So I'm going to create an arrow function, and I'm going to say on drag end, and this is going to be equal to a function. Okay, now I'm going to replace this for my on drag end function. Okay, I'm going to copy the space here. Okay, now if you see here, this is working fine. Let me put this down here. Now, it's a good practice to wrap this inside a callback. But before I do that, I'm going to import all as React from React. And this is from, okay. Now I'm going to say use callback, and use callback, guys. We're going to learn more about this in the future. For now, just follow along with me. Put a callback here. This callback basically takes a function. So let's put this function inside this callback. And the second argument is going to be an array of dependencies, very similar to use effect, right? So yeah, we have one dependency here. I mean, we can add dependencies here, add dependencies that we want to keep in mind to regenerate this function every time that the component re-renders. But if we don't provide anything, if we re-render this component, this function is not going to be re-rendered or regenerated, which is good performance, right? Okay, so this is how this is going to look. Now, this callback, guys, this event here, it's going to have an event on, I mean, a result when we drop something So we can access this result here, and this result is going to be of type drop result. And this type is going to come from this library, right? So this result basically is the result of the new state, I would say, once the user drops something to the drag zone, okay? So we can do something with this result. The first thing that I want to do, it's basically, we can say console log result so that we are able to see what's going on, right? Now, of course, I'm going to leave this for now like that. And inside this, I'm going to add maybe something. Okay, so we're going to have actually a droppable here. So we have the drag context. Now we need a droppable, as you can see here on the left. So inside this droppable, we're going to have some extra things, right? So a droppable needs a droppable ID, which is a string, and it could be anything. So I'm going to say dashboard. This is my droppable ID. This is going to help us to maybe later, based on this ID, check this result, and this result is going to say, oh, someone dropped something on this droppable ID, which is the dashboard, or stuff like that. We also have the type. In this case, the type of this is going to be column, okay? Because this is going to have columns, and we can drag and drop columns, right? We can drag and drop these columns on this droppable. Cool. So let's put this again. We also need to have a direction, and the direction is going to be horizontal. But guys, keep in mind that on mobile, we want vertical, okay? So keep in mind that we're gonna come back to this. Now we are using in this, this library is using render props. What's the name? This library is using render props pattern, the render props pattern, which inside this, this droppable, we are going to have a callback function. And this callback function is going to look like this, but we can access the provided and also a snapshot of the state that we're going to be getting here. Okay, so this is going to be a list. So I'm going to say UL, and this is an unordered list of columns, right? So if I say unordered list, I need to pass some things so that this droppable knows that this item is going to be like the actual droppable. So we need to pass the ref. Oops, and the ref is going to be get. And we're going to get the ref from this provided. So this provided, we can say inner ref, and that's it, okay? And then we need to pass anything else that comes inside this provider.droppable props. And that's all we need. So this is the configuration. You don't need to really understand how it works. Basically, you just need to pass these two properties to this item, and that's it, okay? Cool, so this is the unordered list, and I'm going to add a border so that we are able to see it on screen. Now, inside this unordered list, we want to actually iterate over the columns, all right? And if you remember, we have this dummy data. Let's go ahead and put the dummy data on the right. We have these columns, right? Pending, done, and ongoing. And we need to iterate over these columns here. So what I want to do now is going to be maybe just import this dummy data. So I'm gonna say dummy data. I don't know if I'm exporting this. Yeah, initial state. So the name is initial state from dummy data. And I'm going to say, well, in this case, we need to iterate over the order that we have in this state, right? So if you remember, we have this board and we have columns, which is the task map, and we have the order. So we need to iterate actually over the order, which is one of these strings. And then based on the order, we want to display the columns. So instead of having this, I'm just going to have columns and hit save. So let's go back here. And of course, we're not seeing anything because if I go to my page, I need to import this dashboard. So this dashboard is going to be, it's gonna go here. So let's say dashboard, enter, hit save. And now create context only works in client components. Remember that because we are using Next.js, every single component, it's a server component by default. So if we want to use the client, we need to have this directive that says use client, okay? keep that in mind. Okay, and here we have the columns. These columns, what did I do here? Let me delete this as well. Now, these columns are this dashboard, which it's a component that looks very complicated at the moment, but don't worry. Now, before I actually go ahead and start, showing the columns here, I actually need I'm going to delete this initial state. I actually need the state at this point, right? So the state, this is the perfect time to actually abstract the state outside this dashboard component. How can we abstract the state? Well, we saw this on previous lessons. We have actually a couple options using state management libraries like Redux, MobX, like Sard, Sustand, or we can simply use the context API that comes with React. And because we really want to master React, we're going to be using the context API. So in the root folder, I'm going to create a new folder that is going to contain my context. And inside my context, I want to have a board context. And actually, instead of creating a folder, I'm going to create a file, which if I say context slash board context slash and then board context.tsx, hit enter, it's going to create the folders for me after each slice. Okay, cool. So now what I want to do is create this context. So I'm going to close this. Let's move this to the right. Now for the context, we need to keep in mind a lot of things, right? The first one is that we need to use client because this is going to be a client component. It's going to be using hooks. It's going to be using context. So that goes in the client. So use client, then I'm going to import all as React from React. Now we already saw how context works, so I'm not going to be, explaining in very detail. I'm just going to import my initial state. This is where I want to deal with my data. All that has to do with data is going to be handled in this context, especially the board data, right? Now I'm going to import as well my board type and also my board. Well, I need to create another type for my actions because we're going to be using as well a reducer to handle the actions that we'll be performing over the state. So let's go ahead and say const board initial state. And this is the state that we really care about because this is the initial state. This is going to be of type board, and this is going to be equal to columns. And remember, the columns are going to be the initial state at the end of the day, and then the order. Now, this is a very, very tricky one because the order is going to be, like I mentioned before, these keys, right? So we can simply grab the keys from the initial state for my initial state, right? So if I say object, we have this method called keys. And if I pass the object that I want to grab the keys from, I can say initial state, and this is going to grab the keys. Of course, this is a comma, and cool. So that's the initial state. Now keep in mind, guys, that every time that we move this, we should be able to save, right, the state, because now we're going to have first pending, then done, and then ongoing. But when the user drags and drop, we need to save that as well. Now let's create the context. I'm going to say board context. This is going to be equal to react.create context. And when we are creating a context, we need to pass the default value, right? So the board state, it's my default value. And my board state is going to be equal to my board initial state. Now, what else I want to save in this context? I actually want to, well, this is not like we're going to save, but we're going to be sharing on the children components inside this context. So I want to share the board state and also a dispatch function. So a dispatch function, guys, it's a function that takes an action, which is going to be a board action. And this type, we don't have it yet. So let's create this type. Let's go to the types and let's export a, well, I'm going to just paste here this board action type. Now we saw this before when we were playing around with reducers and use reducer, the hook. So in this case, we're going to have a couple states, right? When the user, well, the first is going to be set tasks, which is going to be the initial state. So when I load the website, I want to get from a local storage the state of the tasks and then replace the initial state for what we have locally. If we don't have anything locally, we're going to be showing just the initial state that we have by default on the dummy data. Then we also have the types like add task, remove task, move task, and move column. These are really important. And the payload is going to be this on-drag payload and remove task payload, which at the end of the day, it's going to come from this beautiful drag and drop library. This is just a type, draggable location, but we're going to learn more in detail how this is going to work. But basically, when you action, when you move, like for example, a task, this is going to come with a payload when you drop these, right? So when you drop this, we're going to get the source and the destination, which is going to allow us to basically move this. So let's say that you moved a task from pending to ongoing. So what I need to do now is just go to pending, remove the task you moved, and then go back to ongoing and add the task you moved. That's all we're gonna be doing, okay? So let's hit save. Let's just put the dummy data here. Let's go back to the board action, and I can now import this board action, okay? Cool, so this is looking awesome. Let's go to the board context. Let's go back to the board context. And now that we have this board context, we can simply export a component that is going to be the provider. So I'm going to say const board provider. This is going to be equal to a function that it's going to return a JSX element actually, but it's going to get a children inside. And this children is going to be of type React props with children. And inside this component, I can have all my state. So let me close this so that we can have a better looking at this. This is how it looks. This is the board provider. And in here, we can simply say return, and we can return the board context provider. So I'm going to say board context, board context.provider. This is a provider. Remember that a provider needs to provide a value, and the value is going to be a board state and the dispatch. Okay, now we need to create these variables inside this component, right? And then whatever we have inside is going to be a children, and whatever we have inside is going to have access to these values. So, we need to have the data. So my data is going to be handled by a reducer. So I'm going to say use reducer. This is a hook that needs a reducer. So I'm going to create a reducer called board reducer. This is a function that is going to handle the actions over the state. And then I'm going to pass the initial state. Okay, cool. So this is going to return me the board state and then a dispatch function and dispatch function. And dispatch is going to be here, okay? Now this board state is the one that I'm passing here as well, so that we don't have errors anymore. Now we need to create this board reducer. It would be a good idea to abstract this inside a folder called, board reducer. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and create a function down here called board reducer and put it like that, okay? Now, let me add just a comment here. So this is the task reducer. This function handles actions on the state, right? Now, why I'm getting errors now that I put this function here? The reason for that is because we declared that this dispatch should take an action and should also return a board state. So this is going to return a board, and this board comes from the types, okay? Then it's going to take actions, right? So let's say that, well, actually the reducer is going to have access to the state, which is of type board, and then it's going to receive an action, which is going to be a board action. Now, if I type this like that, we don't have errors anymore up here, but now the error is here because this board reducer is not returning a board state, which makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now inside this, we are going to have some switch cases, right? Switch case, and in this case, we're going to be handling the action that we're going to be receiving, right? So the switch case is going to be based on the action type. So I can have a lot of cases, right? So in the case, and because we're using TypeScript and we type every single action that we can perform over this state, we have this really nice autocomplete. The first thing that I want to do is set tasks. Okay, this is going to be in the case that we want to set task, which basically is just going to return the new state. So when we're setting this task, if we go to the board action here, the payload is going to contain a board. So I'm just going to return that board, and that's it. Now I'm still being yelled at because if we don't have any of these cases, we are not going to be returning a board. That's why we need to have a default. And by default, I'm going to return an empty array. Okay, so default return empty array. And this is actually not good. What I'm going to return actually is going to be the initial state, because this is of type board. Okay, now I don't have any errors because otherwise I'm going to always hit this default. Okay, cool. So now we have the set tasks. But now we also want to handle, every single case that we have. So let's go ahead and do that right now that we are here. The first one is going to be move column. Then another case is going to be move task. Then what we have case. We also have add task and remove task. Of course, this is a place where you would need to put, for example, edit task or add task to favorites and stuff like that. So these can be growing and growing, and maybe you will need to, create functions that are going to be changing this state and maybe abstract those functions into other files so that it's easier to test, it's easier to maintain. And yeah, so but for now, this is just a test. This is just a one-person project, so it's okay if we do it here. Okay, cool. So now get ready, guys, because this is going to be a little bit complicated. We're going to be dealing with this state. So let's say that someone is going to move a column. This is the logic, the business logic. What we want to do when someone moves a column. So remember that we have this order array, and this order array, just for your understanding, it's going to look like this. So we have what we have. Let's go to the, sorry, I need to look at the dummy data. We have pending, then we have done and ongoing. Okay, so we have pending, ongoing, and done, right? So we have these three order keys. So when someone moves a column, basically they are going to be moving, for example, pending to the place of done, so that we need to move done to the place of pending and stuff like that. So we need to basically replace the previous array or the previous order, and I'm going to create a new copy of what we had already. So on the order array, we had basically this, right? Before the user moved something. Now I need to remove, so I'm going to say removed from where the user dragged. So if the user moved the pending, I'm going to remove that one. Okay, how I'm going to do that? Well, I'm going to say result.splice, which is a method that is going to allow us to remove elements from an array if necessary, and inserts new elements in their place, returning the deleted elements. Okay, so if I say action.payload.source.index, this is going to return the index, and I want to remove 1. Okay, then I can say again result.splice, but in this case I want to say action.payload.destination index, and in the destination I don't want to remove anything, so I'm gonna say 0, but I want to actually add the removed. Okay, so the one I removed here, I want to put it on the destination. Okay, and that's all we're doing here. Now this is going to we're going to generate a new state, and the new state is going to contain whatever we had before on the state, but also the new order order there, but a new order result. Okay, so remember the state is going to have sorry, it's going to be, yeah, so the state is going to have columns and order. So we're going to replace this order field by the new array that we have here. Okay, so now the only thing that we need to do here is actually a very important thing: save locally, because we want to persist this. Okay, so I'm going to say local storage dot set item, and we need a key, so I'm going to name my keyboard json.stringify. I'm going to pass a new state. I want to save my state locally and then return my new state, right? Perfect. So I hope this makes sense. Now we're going to be doing basically the same when a user moves a task. But when a user moves a task, we need to handle a couple extra states. So for example, let's say that a user moved to the same column, or if the user moves to other column, right? So I'm going to start by validating if the payload source dot droppable ID is equal to action dot payload dot source, sorry, destination dot droppable ID. So if the source is equal to the destination, then we don't have to do anything, right? So we can simply, well, actually, if this means that the user moved inside the column, right? So let's go to the example again. So if I move this to other column, this means that the source is different than the destination, right? But if I move this get job down here, it's the same source, same destination, but we need to validate now if it's the same position on the column, right? Or not. So this is where we do this. So move task, in this case, we need to reorder within the same column. So I'm going to just put a comment here so that we know what's going on here. And then I'm going to say reordered tasks. It's equal to, and I'm going to just copy whatever we had before on the state columns, add position action dot payload dot source dot droppable ID. Okay, so what I'm doing here is basically grab the columns that we have, for example, in done, which is this column, right? Yeah, so I mean, I'm not grabbing the columns, but I'm grabbing the task inside this. So this is an array of tasks at this point. And now we're going to be doing the same. We're going to remove the move task. So the move task is going to be equal to reorder task dot splice, then action dot payload dot source dot index, and we want to delete it, right? Then what we want to do is say reorder task dot splice action payload destination index, and then 0, and then put the move tasks. Okay. Now what I want to do here, this is the if statement. Okay, so this is going to be a semicolon. Now why I have this error? Slice by 1. Okay, so we are splicing by 1 and then putting it back on the destination index, okay? Cool, so now we have a new state, right? Let's save the new state on a new object. This new state is going to contain whatever we had before, but we need to update the columns in this case. So the columns now are going to have whatever we had before on the columns, but now we need to replace the action.payload source.droppable ID, which is going to be the key, and then pass the new array with the reorder tasks. Okay, cool. Now what we want to do with this state, we want to save it locally and then return it. So I'm going to say return new state. But on top of that, before I do that, I'm going to say local storage dot set item, then pass the key, which is word, and then pass the data on a string, which is going to be JSON stringify new state. Cool. Hit save, and this is how it looks. Cool. So this is working fine, but keep in mind, guys, that this if statement is just handling when you are dragging and dropping on the same column. Now we need to have another case that is going to be handling elements that move on different columns. So handling moving between different columns. And this is going to look very similar, but we are not going to hit this statement if we enter in this if statement. But otherwise, if we are moving between columns, we are going to be handling this statement. So what we need to do is actually just start tasks, create two arrays, right? One for the start task and one for the finish tasks. So we're grabbing from, basically we are grabbing the items that we have, for example, in this column, and we're grabbing the items that we have, for example, in pending. And let's say that I move from done to pending, we need to update that state. So we grab these two arrays of tasks, and then we removed from the source. So we splice where we start, we splice and delete from the source one, which is if I move this one. So we delete from done, and then we simply add that one to the finish column. So we added this build to the pending in this case, and we pass the action payload and pass the removed one. Okay. Now we save the new state, which is whatever we had before on the columns, but now we replace for the new state, save locally and return it. Okay. Okay, and all this is just to move a task. Now, if we want to add a task, this is going to be fairly easy, and I'm sure you can do it by yourself. It's going to be basically just create a new state that is going to contain what we had before. And on the columns section, so I'm going to say columns. On the columns section, we're going to have the state.columns, and we are going to add this on the pending by default, because this is a new one and it's going to be pending by default. So this is very easy. I'm just going to grab whatever we had before on this. I'm going to put the payload on first, which is going to be the first task. And then I'm going to just copy paste whatever we had before on pending. Okay. And this is how it looks. And that's it. Now we need to save. So I'm going to say local storage.save and return the new state. Okay. So I'm just copy paste this, and this is how it looks. So adding a task, very easy. Moving was the tricky one. And then removing a task is going to be actually pretty easy. So let's go ahead and, yeah, of course, I made this comment. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. But what I'm doing here is basically pass the ID of the tasks that we want to delete. Okay, I create a copy for the state, and then I iterate over each column, which is pending, ongoing, pending. And then for each column, I'm going to iterate over the list inside these columns. Okay, so in this case will be get a job, then I iterate over ongoing, and over ongoing I iterate over review and hello world. And then when I found the task that I want to delete based on the ID, I filter. Okay, so I'm filtering here, and then I saved. And that's how it works. And it works very good, because if I come here and delete this, it's going to work just fine. Cool. So maybe we can improve this by passing the key of the column so that we don't have to iterate over every single column in the board. Maybe just position ourselves on the source key and delete it, okay, and filter. But yeah, you can do that at home. Cool. So yeah, this is how it looks removed, and that's all the actions we're gonna be handling for now, guys. I know that this board reducer was very heavy, but the ones we have that, basically that's the logic for our application. So once we have that, we are good to go. And actually that was the fun part. That was, handling the data structures, creating the algorithms, maybe some testing. And that's the fun part, right? Or not, maybe not. Anyways, let's move on. Now, we want to handle these states, right? So whenever I'm going to be, loading this application for the first time, we're going to be loading this task from the local storage. So it's a good idea to have a loading state and then set loading. And this is going to be using use state. This is very simple logic. This is going to be equal to false, and the type is going to be a Boolean. Okay, So this boolean equal to false, loading, set loading. Okay. Now, if I want to load this on the component mount, so I'm gonna use a use effect to access this lifecycle event. So empty array because I just want to run this when the component mounts, and I want to load data here. So this is going to be a function. I'm going to create this function called load data, and I had a typo. Okay, so load data is going to be a function that is going to just check the local storage. So local board data, it's going to be inside local storage dot get item, and then the key is board with an at the beginning. Okay, now this is going to be either null if we don't have anything. So if local board data is equal to null, it means that we don't have anything. So I'm going to say local storage set item, and I want to set the board locally to whatever we have on the default initial state. Okay, so I'm going to say board initial state. Okay, that is in the case that we don't have anything. Now, otherwise, I'm going to put an else, and let me just scroll a little bit here. Else, what I want to do is say data object. This is the case that we have data already, right? So I need to grab the object. So to grab the object, I need to parse by saying JSON.parse the string that we're going to be getting from the local board data. And once I parse that, this is going to be a JavaScript object that I can dispatch to my state. So if I say dispatch and select the type, and because we type everything, we have this set task, and now we need to pass the payload, which is going to be the data object. Everything is going to be just fine. We just need to pass this, and every single component inside this provider is going to have access to the new state. Okay, and finally, set loading equal to false. Just in case that this took maybe half a second, we need to let the user know that we stopped loading. And now here, if we are loading, I'm just going to return. I don't want to return anything, just a blank screen. Okay, so once we have data, we pass to the provider, we pass the board state in the dispatch function so that inside this provider, we can dispatch actions over the state. Okay, and we have the handler here, and this should be working. Okay, now we need to use this context in the application. So it's a good idea to abstract this inside a custom hook. So this is my custom hook for easy context usage. This is just use board, which is going to return basically the dispatch and the board state. This is what is going to return this function. Okay, cool. And we have, this is very well typed by TypeScript. If you want to add the type, you're welcome to do so. But yeah, we're good to go. Now I can actually close this board context and go to my layout. If you remember, the layout is going to be the entry point of the application, and we need to wrap whatever we want to provide, right? So I'm going to say board provider, and I want to wrap my children. Okay? So I'm going to paste this here, and this is how it looks. Now everything inside this provider is going to have access to the board state. Now keep in mind, guys, that using Next.js, it's very nice because this is going to run on the server, but we have a client-side component here, and it's okay. What Next.js is going to do is actually render this instantaneously and then render this. Okay, so this is very nice. We don't need to worry about server and client. Just marking this border provider as client component is going to do the trick. Cool. So we have now the provider. We have the logic for the state. I'm going to close these files for now. We can actually start integrating the UI. So we don't have anything on the UI. So yeah, we have the dashboard, and for creating the dashboard, guys, we need to have columns, right? Because we have columns here. So for creating this dashboard, we need to have columns, and for creating columns, we need to have items, and for creating items, we need to have task list for a column, and for a task list, we need to have a task item, and for a task item, we need to have like a card, a title. Okay, so so let's actually go ahead and start by trying to decouple all these components that we're going to be needing. So inside components, let's go ahead and start creating a component that is going to contain just the item of the task. So task item.tsx. Then now that we are here, actually, let's go ahead and create another component called task list. And as you may guess by now, task list is going to contain a list of task items. Okay. Then we are going to create another component, which is going to be a column, which a column is going to be a droppable. I mean, it's going to contain a droppable list, and a column is going to be a draggable as well, right? So this is going to be another component. It's a good idea to abstract it. And then finally, I'm going to create another component, which is going to be my component just for creating a task. And this is going to be, you know, the last thing that we're going to be doing, but let's just leave it like that for now. Okay, and that's pretty much all we need. Let's start with the task item. The task item is going to be a very fun one. The task item is going to start by importing all as React from React. And now this is a fun part because we're going to be using our card component. If you remember, we installed the card. So let's import the card. And card, if you want to really learn how to use the card, you can come here and see the structure, like the anatomy of this component and the example of how we should be using this card. But yeah, so for now, let's just go ahead and import, for example, card, then card content, then also basically everything that he has here, we need to import it. So what I can do is simply say that I want to import this from my UI card. Okay. Now I'm also going to import some other stuff. I'm going to import my tasks from my types. I'm going to import a draggable provided. Then I'm going to import as well a CN. This CN, it's a helper function that basically helps us to merge Tailwind CSS classes. Okay, that's all it does. It's a helper function. I'm going to need that as well. I'm going to import a button, then some icons, then a drop-down menu, and finally my state, right? So I'm just going to copy these imports. I don't want to write them manually. We're going to need a button. We're going to need some icons for the drop-down. And we're also going to need the drop-down. We already installed those, so it's okay. We have access to them. And finally, we need the meat. We need the state. So we can import use board, which is our hook that is going to allow us to access the state and the dispatch actions. Okay, very nice. So now that we have this, let's see how this is going to look. So an item is going to receive props. It's going to receive a task as property. So which means the data, the ID, the title, and all that. Then also is going to receive a state. The state that we care about is going to be if we are dragging or not, and also the provided by the context of the drag and drop library. Okay, so this is how these properties are going to look. So let's create this type, and then let's create this component by saying task item. These are the properties that we are going to be getting. And then this is going to be a function that is going to return a JSX element. If you want, you can say here JSX element, or simply leave it like that. Okay. So if we check this out, we have access to this isDragging provided, which comes from the library. Well, this is just a Boolean and then task. Okay. Now, remember guys, this is going to be rendered inside a list of items. So it's a good idea to say that this is going to be a list item using the tag list item. Now, if you remember, I told you that when we are dealing with draggables, we need to provide the reference and these props that come with this provider. Okay, so let's add those here. And then we're also going to need, access to the actions using our board. And if I do autocomplete here, you see that I have access to the board state and also the dispatch. So for now, I just need the dispatch because let's say that I want to delete this task item. So I need to dispatch the delete action and pass the ID of this task. Okay, cool. Yeah, so now we can create actually a card inside these list items. So I'm going to say card. This is like the container. And for this card, I'm going to add a class name. Now I want to combine some class names. So that's why I'm saying CN. And the reason for that I'm saying that is because I can say cool things like it's dragging. And if it's dragging, we can say background slate 50. Otherwise, we just pass an empty string. Now, these combined classes allows us to simply add a comma here and keep writing more classes. And this is going to combine them, which is pretty nice. It's more readable that way and looks cool. Okay, so that's the card. Now, inside the card, we need a card header. And the card header, I'm going to add a class name as well, padding bottom of 3. And then inside the class header, I want to have a div because I need to have two items here that I want to align from left to right, which at the end of the day, it's going to be this icon and the title. Okay, so that's going to be inside a div. And inside here, we need to have a card title, and the card title is going to be just the task.task, which is the string, right? And yeah, this is how it's going to look. Now, the second thing that I want to have here is going to be a drop-down menu. So I'm going to say drop-down menu. Of course, this is just drop-down menu. And inside this, we need to have this drop-down menu trigger. The trigger is going to be a button. So because I'm going to have this button inside, I'm going to say it as child. Okay, and this button is going to be these 3 dots that we have here. So I can say dots icon, which I'm importing from Radix UI, Radix icons. And yeah, so this button is going to have some styling. We can choose variants. So if I say variant, I can have default, destructive, ghost, and all that good stuff. But for now, I'm going to say outline, and then size, icon, class name, just placing this on the right. Now this div needs to align these items from left to right. So I'm going to say class name flex, justify between, and that's it. Okay, so that's the trigger, that's a button. But when we click the trigger, we need to show this, this drop down, right? So I'm going to create a drop down content. So if I just paste this drop down content item, no class name, just like that, you can delete this. Then we have, drop down menu label, which is options. This is this little title that we can see here. Then we have ghost, the variant of these buttons, and we have every single button with a icon. And when we are deleting, in this case, we are dispatching remove task and passing on the payload the current task ID. So this task ID, we are grabbing it from the properties that we are passing here, right? This task is of type task, and each task has these properties, and that's how we do it. Okay, so we have these variants, these options as well, but we don't have any action. As you can see here, you can do whatever you want with these actions. But yeah, so let's just close this content. This is all the drop down menu. And once we have this drop down menu, after the header, we can actually display the description. Now keep in mind that we can have some tasks that don't have description. So we can simply validate if we actually have description. We want to have a card content, which is going to render the description. Now keep in mind that I don't really have to deal with styling everything, just moving things a little bit, adding paddings here and there. And that's because we're using these components that already are supporting styles, right? Cool, so this is the description. And then finally we need a footer, and the footer is going to contain, the task date as well as a calendar icon and the priority. So the priority is going to look like this. Basically, validating if the tag is equal to high, medium, and otherwise it's going to be green. Okay, this is how it looks. Nice. So yeah, that's all we need for now. Now, there's a very important thing here. You know that I really like to export this default here, but now I didn't export it because this component is going to be inside a list of components that are going to be changing. And every time that these components change, they are going to be causing these components to re-render. So what I'm saying is that if I move these to the left and right and change this state, every time that the list changes, we are re-rendering these items. But we can prevent this by using a memoization, or basically caching this item, because these items are not going to change every time that the parent re-renders. So a cool thing that we can do this is say react.memo, and this is going to memoize basically a component, which is a task item, and we can pass the type here as well, task item props, which is the props that we're going to be getting here. Okay, hit save. This is a very cool way to improve performance, and we're going to learn a little bit more about memo in advanced React. Okay, so this is the component. Now that we have the component, we can actually move to the list, right? Because we have the component, we now need the list. So let's go to the list. The list is going to look something like this. We are going to start by, of course, I don't have this form yet. We're going to start by importing these draggable properties from React Beautiful DnD. The type of task, we're going to import a card, because if you pay attention, these columns are cards. And then we have task item, which is a component that we just created, button and some icons and this helper function. So nothing crazy at the moment. Now, this list is going to get some properties, right? What properties we care about? Well, we need to pass a title, right? For the list. We need to pass an ID as well. We need to pass a list type, and this is an optional. This list type could be, in this case, string, for example, like a description or something. List of tasks, which is the task that we have inside this list, and then is drop disable. So we could have this option, right? So if we don't want the user to be disabling, we can disable. Okay. Now, a couple things to keep in mind for this component is that this component supports dropping items. It also renders a list of draggables. Okay, so keeping that in mind, let's go ahead and export default this component. So this component is going to look something like this. We are going to have these properties. List ID is going to be list. I don't know if I stop the server. Okay, so everything is working. Now the list ID by default is going to be list if we don't provide a list ID. But we can, based on this, we can identify every single list that we have here. Okay. Now we need to have some logic here, but for now, I'm just going to render a droppable, because this is going to be a section where users can drop tasks, right? Now, when we are dealing with droppables, we need to have, this droppable ID, the type, and everything, every single item here, we are getting it from the props. Now, if you remember, because this is using render props design pattern, render props pattern, we need to have a function, and this is going to return us the properties that we need to pass to this draggable and droppable, right? So these properties are going to look like this. We are typing this as well from the library. And now we need to render the component, right? The component, it's going to be a card. This card, we need to pass the properties. So droppable props. And inside the card, we can actually start creating the design that we want. So I'm going to start by creating a card header inside this card. And of course, this show form is not going to be working for now. So I'm just going to comment these lines and hit save. So this is basically just for showing this creating, right? Create. That's why I'm validating here if the type is pending. I want to show this. Otherwise, we don't want to show, the create new task on this done and ongoing, right? Although we could do it if we want to. Okay, so yeah, so we have this title. It's going to look like this. Then after the header, I want to have the list content. So for the list content is going to be very simple actually. List content is going to render a list of, right? Now create task form. It's also the form for creating a new task. So I'm going to comment that. Now this inner list is going to be not a droppable, but a draggable, okay? So the inner list, this is going to be pretty fun. The inner list is going to be another component that I'm going to create down here. Okay, so this list component, I actually can simply copy paste it and put it here. You can abstract it if you want. Basically, it's just a component that is going to contain the UI. Okay, so the UI for this is going to be basically the list of tasks, and we could also have another title if you want, and drop provided, which is the properties for dropping stuff, right? Now the thing to keep in mind here, guys, is that if you pay attention, when we go back to the task item, we have just a list item, right, with properties, but we don't have like the draggable stuff here. That's why we are creating this inner list, and we are passing this draggable or just wrapping this task item with the draggable. That's why we are able to drag and drop this item, right? And we're passing just the properties we need for each single task item, and for each draggable we pass the ID in the index. Okay, index is very important because the index is helping us to rearrange these items. Okay, so this is the list of items, and we are rendering this list inside this droppable, right? Cool. Now we can drop list inside this list. This is how it works. Okay, so this is the task list. Cool. Now we can hit save, and now what I want to do is actually create the column. Okay, so if you pay attention, at the moment we are handling just the drag and drop inside these columns, inside this list, sorry, and the list includes the title and this button, right? Now we need the columns because the columns are going to be as well draggables and droppables. So let's abstract this inside a column, and a column is going to be another pretty nice and interesting component that is going to look something like this. So this component is going to contain a column. So we're not going to need to import task and draggable because we want the columns to be dragged. Okay. Then the task list, because this list is going to be like the draggable as well. So this column is going to get some properties as well. Okay, it's going to get the list title, the list of tasks, and the index. And this component is very simple. I'm just going to paste it here. This component is going to export default this column. It's going to destructure these properties that we define here, the list of tasks, the index, and the index is basically the index of done, which is 0, the index of pending, which is 1, the index of ongoing, which is 2, and so on. And then we are just creating a draggable because we want these columns to be dragged, but these columns contain a task list, right? This is where we needed to create another div, which is like the container of the task list. And this div is what we are dragging. That's why we're passing these properties. That's why this is a draggable here. Okay, so we pass the ref, we pass the properties, and then we render the task list, passing the list title, passing the list type, which is task, passing the list of tasks, which is this list of tasks, which is the array that we're going to be having inside this list. And then is drop disable equal to false. Of course, you can add like a switch for this, then the title. Okay, it's safe. That's all we need. So basically, just this is a draggable. Now, this is a draggable, but I think we need a droppable, right, for these columns. So let's go back to the dashboard. Okay, if you remember, let's go back to the dashboard. This is a droppable. So our container or board needs a place where I can drag and drop columns. That's why I said type column. That's why this column has a task list that has a list type of task, which means that we can drop just tasks, right? Not columns. Okay, so let me close this. Let me close this as well. So this is type column, direction horizontal, but we need to change this on mobile, right? So keep that in mind. Now, very easily, we can simply say that we want to render columns here, right? So we can simply iterate over the board state. And the board state, where can we grab this board state? Well, we can grab it from, let's go up here and say const equal to use board. This hook contains the board state, and we need a column, which is the component that we already have. Okay, and we're going to be iterating over the order, okay, which is an array of strings, if you remember. Okay, if you don't remember, let's go quickly to the context and let's quickly maximize this. And this is the array of order, which is the keys of the object. And basically we are iterating over this. And for each single one, for each board state, we are just grabbing the board state columns at position key, which is the item that we're rendering. So in other words, if I go to the dummy data, we are iterating over these strings, right? But then I'm grabbing this state and position myself over the current key that I'm iterating and grabbing the list. Okay, hope that makes sense. And yeah, so just rendering the column. Now, if I hit save, let's go ahead and come back here. As you can see, this is how it looks for now. Now, at this point, we have everything, but it's just one column, right? So it means that everything worked, but I cannot drag and drop. I don't know why. We have this dashboard. Okay, let's see if we are missing anything here. Yeah, so let's actually try to fix the UI. First of all, what I want to do here is say that this is horizontal. So this is good. Now, I want to add a class name for this unordered list, right? So this is going to be a grid. This grid is going to have 3 columns. So if I hit save, now we are able to see the columns. Let's try to reload this. So if you pay attention, we have that little lag where we are loading everything and then displaying, right? But now the drag and drop is not working. And I remember now that this library, guys, has a trick. So because we're using Next.js, let's go to the next config, and we need to deactivate React strict mode. So I'm gonna say React strict mode here equal to false. Oops, false. If I can write, hit save. And then I'm going to restart the server. So let's go to the terminal, stop and restart and reload. So if you have this bug, in order to have this drag and drop working, you need to disable strict mode. Okay. So yeah, it took me a couple hours to know that, but yeah. So everything is working as expected, as you can see. But if you pay attention, every time that I drop something, everything is returning to the previous state, I think. So this is not working like very properly. And we need to check that. I'm going to check that in a moment. Yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to have in this dashboard. We have these columns we are iterating over. We have this provided droppable. This is a UI, this is a droppable. Then, of course, something very important. That's why we are not able to save the state. It's because when we are ending the drop, we are not doing anything, just putting on the console some results. And if I inspect, you can see that these results are this object. Let me make this bigger for you. So if you pay attention, guys, we have the destination object and the source object, and this is how the data looks when we drag and drop. So let's drag pending and drop it at the end, okay? So we have this event. We are dragging, as you can see, pending. Then this is a column, type column. Destination was index 2, which is correct. I drop it here. And then the source was index 0, which is correct because I took it from the left, right? So based on this result, we can handle our state. Okay, so I'm going to close this for now. I'm going to remove this, and inside my callback, I want to have some data. So the first thing that I want to check is if the result.destination, if we don't have a destination, which means the user came and dragged this outside of the window, or outside of my droppable, I don't want to do anything. So this is a very important validation. Otherwise your app is going to crash. And then let's try to handle this elegantly. So I'm going to abstract my source, which is of type draggable location. So let's import that type. This is going to be equal to react.source. Sorry, result.source. And this is we're grabbing this from the result, which is what we get once the user drops something, right? So let's duplicate this, but in this case we're going to have a destination. Destination is going to come from the destination that comes inside the result. And finally, we have two cases, right? If the result type is equal to a column, if the result type is equal to a column, and that's why we have column, and also we had another one called task, right? So that we can differentiate here when the drag ends. So if this is a column, we're gonna say dispatch, and of course we need to use our dispatch here. So let's grab that from the hook. Let's say dispatch. The type is going to be move column in this case, because we know that the result type was column. So it means that the user is moving a column, and we need to pass a payload, which is going to be the source and destination. Okay, and this is how this dispatch looks. Now, very important, I want to return here. I don't want to keep going on this function because at this point I already handled everything. And now let's handle the case where the user moves a task. So I'm going to say task. And maybe it would be a good idea to create a type for this column and task, or like an enum to contain this, so that we don't have typos here. Of course, we don't have this type here. In this case would be move task, and the payload is going to be source and destination as well. So we don't need to do anything else, right? So let's just add a couple of comments here so that we can remember when we come back to see this. We are reordering moving tasks and columns. Now here, this function, it's inside this callback, right? And this callback needs to be regenerated every time that we move, or every time that we actually dispatch some action, right? Because the state of this function is going to be different. So we can simply add this dispatch to the array of dependencies of the use callback, and everything is going to work just fine. Okay, now let's try this out. Let's try to move these donuts. Okay, and this is working just fine. Perfect. Now let's go back, guys, to the column, I believe. No, it's going to be task list. So the task list is going to be handling, the state of whenever the user is trying to create a new task, right? So if I go to the task list, I want to start by creating some state. So on the task list, I'm going to have a variable, very simple variable, show form. If we want to show the form, we can simply, this header, I'm going to uncomment this when the user presses this icon. Okay, and it's working, right? So I hope you can see this. It's a little small. Maybe I can make this bigger. And if you pay attention, it's like rotating, which is very nice. And I'm using CN to combine these two classes. And basically just rotating based on the state of this show form, transitioning all easy in, easy out. Okay, cool, right? So yeah, so we are showing the form here, but we don't have this form. So we need to create this component actually, right? We have this create task form, but we never did it. So create task form is actually going to be a pretty large component because I want to use the form that comes with this library, chat UI. And this form is using the use form hook from React hook form, and we can check it out here. Maybe you have heard of it, but yeah, it's not loading. So let's go back. So this React hook form, maybe I can look it up. React hook form. It's a very famous hook that we can use. Yeah, and it's not loading. I don't know why. But yeah, anyways, we can use it to validate forms and provides a very useful API. And now in here, we're going to be using SOD for validation. Maybe let me make this bigger. This uses SOD for validation, which is a library for validating stuff. Form field, React use ID for generating unique IDs. And yeah, so basically this is the anatomy of the form. And if you want to learn more about this form and how to handle everything, you can come here and read it by yourself. But now let's integrate this into our task manager. Okay, so for my task manager, I want to start by importing some things. So this is going to be a client component as well. And then I'm going to import some icons, a button, my card, drop down menu, because we have a lot of things going on inside this create task form. I need an input, I need sort for validation, I need my hook use form. So this hook was installed when we added the form component using chatcn. If you are not using this UI library, you may need to install this by yourself, okay? Now we also have this sort resolver from this library that was installed as well when we installed the card. And if you don't believe me, we can go here and check it out that we have this, for example, hook form. Yeah, there it's the first one. Okay, yeah, and yeah, so we have those. We have this. So basically here we're just importing the use form, the validation libraries, and components, UI components. Some hooks from React, dispatch, set action, state. These are types, and use state is a hook. Then we have use board, which is our hook, and then some more UI stuff. Okay, now this when we are using the form, the use form scheme or hook, we need to declare a scheme for the data. So for my data is going to have just a task and description. And the task, we can say that this is going to be a string, minimum of 2 characters. And if there's an error, we want to show this message, enter at least 2 characters and maximum 100. So just like that, we're able to have these really nice validations without having to create external functions or stuff like that. So let's export default this component. This is how it's going to look. I'm going to say return, and this is how it looks, right? So we are going to get this set show form as property, which is a setter dispatch react. Okay, set action. It's a boolean. It's what we have on the list, right? So let me close this, and if we go back here, sorry, let me go here. Yeah, so this is where we are handling the show or not show of the form, right? And this is where we're going to be having this. Of course, let's go back here. We need to return something. Now, before we can actually return something, I'm going to create a some state here for the form. So the form state is going to look like this. We are using the hook use form. Then we are inferring the type of the form based on the form schema, which is this, which at the end of the day is task description in both our strings, right? And if I hover, you can see that these are substring, which contain validation. Okay, then resolver, we need to say subresolver and pass the form schema. This subresolver, we are importing it from the hook form. These are default values. We can define them as well. We are grabbing the dispatch action from the use board. Then we are declaring a tag and set tag. This is going to change because we have this select, right? When we are creating a form. So if I go here and press Command K to create a new form, new task, sorry, we have this drop down. This is where we're going to be handling this tag state based on the selection. Okay, so let's go back. This is the variable that is going to be handling that. Then we have this onSubmit function, which is going to take the task description that comes already validated at this point by sod, and then we can dispatch a task passing the payload, which is a new task. This is how a new task looks like. I'm just grabbing a random UI because you only live once. Date, and then tag, description, and task. So this is just passing whatever we have in these values. Then set show form equal to false. And finally, we can have this form. So this form, guys, it's going to have the anatomy that we can check out here. We need to have a form, then a form field for each one of these elements. So I'm just going to paste this here. This is a little bit large, but don't get scared. It's just a form. We need to pass the form like this. This form comes from here. So we're destructuring every single property. Then we need to have this form HTML simple tag because we have the event onSubmit here, and we need to pass the form handle submit onSubmit, which is our function here. Okay, this is how we handle the submit. Then we're just creating a card And inside the card, we have a header, and this card looks very similar to a task. So I actually was inspired by the task. So if I move this to the right so we can see better, this is the card for creating a new task. Then we have this form item, which contains this field. We are passing just an input. We don't need to handle anything else, just passing the placeholder. Out of focus, because when I show this, I want to out of focus as soon as possible on the title. And then we're doing the same for the other input, but this is a task area text area. Okay, so the cool thing about this is that we can drag and drop, and now here we have this drop down menu. We already saw how we can create this drop down menu. We have this button with an icon. It's just very simple. Then we also have the content, which is a select. Now, a cool thing about to know this is that whenever we select or clicked on each item, I'm just setting the tag to be high, medium, or low. Of course, there should be a better way to do this, but for now, it's going to do it. It's going to do the trick. And yeah, we're doing basically the same for each component. So I'm going to, yeah, so maybe we can minimize this. Yeah, this is just a drop down menu. Once we have that, we also have the form field for the description, which is a text area, as you can see here, and passing the properties that comes with this render. Okay. So again, they are using the render props pattern, design pattern that we can use with React. And then we have two buttons from left to right. Whenever we cancel, set show form equal to false. Whenever we save, this is a type submit, which is going to trigger this on submit, which is going to call this function and add the task. Okay, so let's hit save. Let's come back here and import this create task form, hit save, and let's go back to the local host and let's see if this works. Okay, and it works. Okay, now we also have shortcuts, right? This is a cool thing, and this is why I like to use this task manager in my daily basis. I actually use it in my work to track some things to do for the day, and it's very useful. And the thing that I love is that I can say Command K and I'm able to start creating a new task. Okay, so how can we handle that? So if you remember, we are handling this on the task list, and we are showing the form every time that we press this button, right? But now we want to show this form whenever we press a key. So this is going to be very simple, guys. We just need to have a listener using a use effect. So using a use effect, we can set a listener using the document property that comes with the browser. And we can use this document because this is a task list item that is inside a client component. So if I say document.addEventListener, key down, and whenever we press down, which is, well, this is like the handler, which is going to take the event, which then we can validate if the key is equal to K and meta key and control key prevent default say shown equal to whatever it was before, but the contrary. Okay, and then if it's escape, we need to show form equal to false. Okay, so at this point, just validating what key the user is pressing. Now if I say Command K, of course not working because I haven't saved. Command K, it's working. I mean, we're just triggering based on the keyboard, and if I press escape, we're gonna be closing. Okay, which is really nice and allows me to create tasks quickly. Okay, because we also have the out of focus. So this is going to be out of focus right away. And if I, for example, I'm here, Command K, hello, right away, tap, save, and that's it. Okay, so didn't save. Hello, enter, and there we go. So just like that, I was able to something enter. So that was super quickly, okay? That's what I like to do. I like to do things quickly. Now, if I go ahead and hit save, you can see that the validation is working. Make this smaller. This validation is working based on the form, okay? So every single time that we validate a required item, this is going to work just fine, okay? We can delete this and everything is working just fine. Cool, right? And yeah, guys, so that's pretty much all I wanted to show you. This was a pretty heavy project, I know, but I hope that you follow along with me, and I hope that you did it by yourself. Maybe you change something, maybe you add something. And yeah, oh, another cool thing is that if we go to the dummy data, and of course I need to inspect this, and let's go to the application. We saw this when we learned about local storage. I'm going to just clear everything from my local storage, reload, and now have the board, right? Now, let's say that we want to add another. So I'm going to create another key here, and this is going to be like deleted, right? And this is going to have ID of 5, and yeah, hit save. Now, if I delete this, I'm going to say clear, reload, close. You can see that just because I changed this, maybe we are getting this from the database or somewhere else, we can simply render this the same way that we are rendering everything else, okay? Now, at this point, I would need to change some things in order for this to work, I think, because I only have space for 3, but this is what I was mentioning before. If we just keep adding more stuff here, this should be scalable and we can keep adding more and more stuff, okay? And yeah, so this is all I want to show you guys. Maybe I can go to the dashboard quickly, and let's go to the column or here, grid. Yeah, so let's say that we have 4 columns, and now this should be working. Now I'm not sure why I'm not able to drag, but you get the idea, okay? Maybe I need to change something else, but yeah, I just wanted to show you that this would be working if you have more items here. Okay, and yeah, that's all I wanted to show you guys. I hope you like this lesson. I hope you learned something new. I hope again that you did it all by yourself, and I hope that you enjoyed this lesson as well. Okay, yeah, if you want to check it out, the demo, go here. You can also check out the source code. I'm going to leave as well the design, and so that you can still play around. Maybe you want to take this project more seriously and integrate a database, authentication, and all that. You are welcome to do it. And yeah, otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.